integration. That's what we're going to be taking a look at today, and it's going to be based on the general concepts of what integration really is. And some people call this software integration or app integration, but it simply means a process of combining APIs to build more robust applications. Or you can just say that it's a process of combining an API with your own code in order to enhance the functionality of your own website or your own web application. That's just what integration is talking about. And in order to do that, I will really have something underlined right here, which is called API right here. So when we talk about API, in fact, let's take a look at the next slide. So on the next slide, we're just trying to take a look at what API is. And the full meaning of API is just application programming interface. And it's just an application or a platform that makes software or apps communicate very well. That's just talking about apps, how applications interact. That's just what this is talking about. And we're going to really take a look at a couple of slides before we can jump in and write some code. But what I want you to understand right now is that when we talk about integration, we're trying to kind of fit some data from an external API, combining it with the code that we are currently writing in order to make what we want our application to do easier for us or make it more robust. That is just what integration is talking about. And there will be nothing like integration if we don't have an API in software development. Okay, so we're just trying to combine one or two APIs and then kind of create a single application that does something very powerful. That's just what that is talking about. And if you want me to really explain this further, I can tell you that if you want to have an application that is going to take some payment from online, you're going to have to use a payment gateway, something like PayPal, Flutterwave, Paystack, Cash Envoy, and the likes. For you to make use of those applications, they are actually REST APIs online that you have to put some data from them, or even put some data onto that particular API online in order to use it and then make your own application work perfectly. In this case, for you to collect payment from people or charge people subsequently for a particular package on your web application. Alright, just understand that it just enables or provides an environment for applications to interact. And it's not just only for softwares, this also works with hardwares. You can integrate hardwares together. Okay, and the things that is going to allow you to do that will have to be that it is really called an API. That's the connection. So if you want to extend the functionality of your own application, you may need an API to do that. Alright, so let's look at the next slide. And the next slide says what we are doing with integration. You may be wondering what we are really doing with integration, which I have already mentioned, but I'm going to have to talk about it again. What we really want to do with integration right here is that we're going to learn how is it that we can fetch data or fetch resources from an API, bring them down to our code and make use of it. That's just basically what we're trying to do. Alright, and I hope that that explanation really makes sense. And if you don't really understand that now, you just have to relax as we move along. Maybe when we write some code, you will understand it more. But I promise before we get to writing code, we are going to understand this better. Alright, so if we have known that we need to combine our own code with an API in order to build a perfect application, and in order to do that, we are going to have to make use of an API. That our resources have to come from an API. Then the next thing is that what are the tools or the technologies involved in doing that? That's the next slide that we're going to take a look at now. So let's take a look at tools / technologies that can be used. Alright, so the first tool is Coil or CURL, and this is really not a technology but it's just a tool. And this particular tool, which is we call that client URL, it's just a tool for transferring data to and from the server for making various HTTP requests. And some of the requests, I'm going to mention some of them right now, are called post, get, put, delete, and then the likes. Then as for the number 2, which is JavaScript. Now JavaScript is an actual language. We can say that it's a technology for making the web pages interactive. But that does not really stop at making web pages interactive. We can also use it to access APIs online, and that's why I have that included in that place. So it's an actual language or programming language that one can use to also access APIs online. And the third one that we have right here is Postman. And Postman is just like that of the Coil. They normally use it to access APIs, fetch data, put data, and even a kind of delete data from a server. Okay, it just looks like that of the Coil. It's a tool, not a language at all. And just almost the same concept that they use right here is what they are going to just be using with Postman, but it has a different syntax if you want to use it. And most people argue quite a lot between the Coil and that of the Postman, and it's actually completely depends on the programmer. Any of these tools that you are really familiar with using their command, you can go ahead and make use of that particular one. But in this part of the integration, on this part of the class, we're going to be making use of Coil. That's what we're going to be doing. And in number 4, which is PAW, and it's just one of the tools that one can use to access APIs, which I have really never used before. But I figured that people normally use that, and that it is okay to add it to this list. So if you want to make use of PAW or PAW, you can go ahead and do that. Alright, so in the next slide, I just give quite a few examples of APIs that are already in existence. So number 1, we have Facebook API. Number 2, we have YouTube API. Number 3, we have Paystack API. We have PayPal API. We have Flutterwave API, and so on. There are really tons of APIs that are already in existence, but it depends on what you want to do. They are really designed for special purposes. So if there is anything you want to do with them, you can just select the right API for yourself and you do the integration, either with Postman or CURL, or you can even use JavaScript or even PAW, depending on the one you want to use. But those are just for a quick example. Those are possible APIs that one can access. Alright, and let's move to the next one, which in this case we're going to just pick that Coil, which is what I said that we're going to discuss in this part, or that we're going to use to access some APIs as we walk along. So Coil, which is the CURL that we've been talking about, is really a powerful tool for transferring data to and from a server, for making various types of requests. And an example or examples of those requests that one can make is number 1, post, and second one is get, and another one is put, and this is delete. Alright, and if to give some more explanations around these requests, number 1 is that this post, most of the time, anytime we want to push some data to the server, we're going to have to use this particular post. And most of the time, people use it with something like a form input. Once they grab some data from the form, they can use this post method or this post request to send that to the API. And as that of the gate is normally based on the URL, which it kind of grabs something from the server, and you can really use that. They normally use this to kind of verify payments on most of the payment platform. And this put is a kind of it still has to put something in the database, but this time around it normally have to do with updating what is already in the database or in the server. Then that of the delete is going to take that away completely from the server. Okay, so let's move ahead to the next slide. So let's take a look at the protocols that Coil supports. Coil supports the following protocols: DICT supports FHIR, it supports FTP, supports FTPS, it supports Gopher, HTTP, HTTPS, IMAP, POP3S, POP3, SMTP, and then the likes. There are quite a lot of protocols that it supports, which you can really Google that and find out by yourself. Okay, but these are the most popular ones that they are really used with. So these are the protocols that are very popular with that of the CURL. Okay, so let's check the next slide. So what is CURL used for? That's a big question that you may be asking yourself right now. Then let's take a look at that. The first thing that you can use CURL for is is that one can use this in command line or script to transfer data. Okay, so we can use these words on our command line or script to transfer data from our system to maybe the API or the server that resides online. Then on the next one, we are talking about Coil is also used in cars and televisions. And that says the fact or displays the fact that it's not just only going to be used on softwares, it can only also be used on hardwares. That's what just these are talking about. Then the third one is talking about hacking, and in that case, that means that Coil can also be used in hacking, okay, ethical hacking or whatever type of hacking that you want to do. But it's just the tool is actually very nice for hacking. And then for the fourth one is used in the internet for transferring of your data to and from, which we have really also mentioned before. So let's move to the next slide. So is Coil free? And of course, yes, the answer is yes. Coil is really free because it's an open source platform, and the latest stable version of Coil right now is 7.75.0. That's the latest stable version. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide. On the next slide, we're trying to explain some common CURL constants and then functions that we have, which we did not really explore all the constants, but we really touched all the major constants that we use daily. And I'm going to leave a link or a kind of direct you to the link where you have to read up the rest of the constants, because we want to mention all of them here. It's going to take quite a lot of time. But we move most of the constants that we're going to need or functions, we're going to have to talk about them right here. So coil underscore init, this is really a function, not a constant. And what it does is that it helps to initialize a coil session. We use this to kind of start the session for coil or initialize coil handler, as some people call that. Then the next one is coil underscore setups. This is really a function for setting up coil configurations. Okay, once we initialize our coil right here, we need to set some configurations for it with coil underscore setups. That way the application will work just the way that we want it to work. And the next one that we have right here is coil underscore exec, which is really a function that is used to execute the CURL session that we have really set here. So we initiated the coil right here, and if you want to execute whatever that coil has, we are going to have to do that with coil underscore exec. So this is basically a kind of execute, or it runs coil. Just understand that this runs coil. Alright, so the next one is a coil underscore close, and this is going to close all the connections, all the session that has been opened right here. That's what that does. So it's going to just close that and then free the memory. So the next thing that we need to look at right now is a call-up underscore URL. This is a constant that is used to set the URL that is initialized within the coil session. Okay, so if you want to kind of set that, we're going to have to use this constant. And in using this, you use this in combination with coil underscore setups, and you don't need to bother yourself right now about knowing how to use it. By the time we write some code, we are going to see how that is being used. So that is just the explanation to that right here. And for the next one, which we call the call-up underscore connect timeout, this is going to kind of allow us to set the seconds, the number of seconds to wait before timing out. We really can use 0 to make the application wait forever trying to make the connection. But what this basically does is that it allows us to kind of enter the number of seconds that we want the application to wait before it times out. Alright, if you want it to wait for a second and time out, you can just go ahead and add a second right there. And then if you add 0, it's just going to wait forever. That's what that means. And the next one is a call-up underscore connect timeout underscore US. And this one is talking about the milliseconds that you want the application to wait while trying to make a connection to the server. That's just what this one is talking about. And 0 on this one can also kind of wait forever. Okay. Alright, so let's look at the next slide. And in the next slide, we're still talking about explanation. We're going to see quite a lot more explanations as we move along. So call-up underscore HTTP underscore version underscore 1 underscore 0. This allows us set the version of the HTTP protocol that we want to use. Okay, that's just what this is talking about. If you want to use something like a version 1.0, version 1.1, this is really how to set it. And looking at this one right now, call up underscore http underscore version underscore 1 underscore 0 means setting that or forcing the HTTP to move over to a version called 1.0, which I really explained down here if you look at it. So this means version 1.0, and this one means version 1.1 if you look at it. So if it's going to be a call up underscore http underscore version underscore 1 underscore 1, that is going to resolve or force over to 1.1 version. Okay, and before we jump this is call up underscore http underscore version underscore none, a kind of it's going to select a suitable version of HTTP that it wants to use. That's just what this is going to do. Okay, just anyone that is suitable, if it is version 1.0 or version 1.1 that is suitable, is going to go ahead and then make use of that, assign it to itself and move on. As for this one, which is call out underscore max connect, this is just really going to allow you put the maximum amount of persistent connections that you want to allow, and after that particular number of a persistent connection, if it allows, it's going to go ahead and then close down the trial. Okay, and if you want to really do that, we're going to have to use that with call out underscore close policy. That way, once you include it here, it's going to know this particular constant is going to know which connection that you want to close at the moment. Alright, so let's check the next slide. The next slide, we are talking about a call up underscore MaxRedirect or MaxRedirect. That is what this is talking about, maximum redirect. And that is talking about the maximum amount of a HTTP request or redirections to follow, rather. Okay, I'm going to read that again. This is the maximum amount of a HTTP redirections to follow. So this is really where you are going to set the number of redirections that you want, the maximum number of redirections. So we are going to have to use this alongside call ups underscore follow location if you want to make use, if you want this to really work fine. So once you set this, you're going to have to follow that up with call up underscore follow location. Alright. Then on the next one, we are talking about call up underscore port, and this is just an alternative port number to connect to. Okay, if you have a particular port that you've really set before, and maybe that particular port does no longer work, or let's assume that something bad is going to happen to it, you can set an alternative. So if it tries that and it doesn't work, it can just try the second port to see how that the connection could go. Alright. As far as this particular constant is concerned, so instead of using something like a gate or a head, this is really a better option or a better constant to use anytime you're dealing with something like a gate or head kind of a request. Okay, and it is really useful when you are trying to delete something off the server. You have to use a call up underscore custom request. It's better than using gate or head. Alright, and then on the next one, we're just talking about this is call up underscore post fields, and all the data. Let us say that you are using this particular connection or this constant with a form data, and you want to pull all the form together. This is really the right place to put it. Okay, it's going to help all the data to be posted in HTTP. That is talking about post now. We're using that with a form request. So this is a post request. So this field is really used with anytime you are grabbing the data that you want to use from a form. So we're going to have to set the constant to be in this form, and most of the time it has to be in an array. Alright, array of API keys, and then the constant the content type. This is really the place where we normally set that. Under this call out underscore HTTP header, that is where you set the HTTP header as a field. You will have to include your API request or your API keys, and then the content type. You set it right here. Alright, so the next one, we're going to take a look at the call request methods that we have, which I have mentioned before, but it doesn't really hurt to go over them again. So we have post, and we have get, we have put, and then we have delete. These are the three powerful methods that are associated with Coil. Alright, so that is just that. And then the next thing that we're going to look at right now is the steps that people can take or one can take to create a script based on a Coil, which is CURL. So the first one in the first thing to do when you are trying to create a script based on Coil is to first of all start a Coil session. And if you want to do it, you can do it. You can save that in a variable. CURL right here is a variable. Okay, and this dollar sign shows that this is a PHP variable. You can go ahead and set that to the Coil function that we mentioned before or explained before, which is Coil_init, which means that you are trying to initiate a Coil session right here or start a Coil right there. And then on the next line, we say set Coil URL options. And what that means is that this is a function we've already dealt with before, and this is really where we set the constant or we set the configurations for whatever that we want to do. Okay, so with this coil_setups, we set configurations right here. Then the third thing that we need to do is to go ahead and run the coil, and to run that we use a function that we call a coil_exec to run the function. We're going to have to pass in the coil initializer or the coil session. In this case, this is just a CURL, $CURL, which is what we saved this particular function inside of this place. So we just pass that onto here. And finally, the next thing that one would need to do is to go ahead and then kind of close the resources or close the session, which is the coil you started before now. And to do that, we're going to have to use coil_close to pass in the initializer, which is CURL right there. So that is just that. And then I think that the next thing that we're going to do is to take a look at how we can really do this, talking about let's interpret this within our coding environment and see how is it we can set initialize coil, set some options, and then run the coil. Then we can go ahead and close it right here. I think that's the next thing that we're going to do. So let's take a look at that right now. That's why I said practical. So finally, we are beginning to get into writing some code. Alright, so before we write any code right now, I want to explain a couple of things to you concerning our environment. And the first thing that I would like to let you know is that you need to have an internet connection as you work with your APIs. The reason for that is because the API that we are using, or most of the time that people are using, are always residing online. So in order for you to feed the data, you are going to have to be connected. So if you look at my system right now, and if you hover on this, you see that I have internet access. I'm not doing this offline. I mean, I could be coding offline, but fetching some data, I have to be connected. My machine has to be connected to the internet in order for me to fetch any data from the API. Okay, so make sure that your system has internet enabled, a kind of internet enabled right now, and then we can move from there. So the next thing that I would like to do right now is the environment that I'm really developing this application on. You remember that we're going to have to do this with PHP. That's where we're going to have to combine this coil with right now. So coil is preferably used with PHP. So I'm going to use PHP to kind of access whatever that I want to access. And to do that, we're going to need something like a server. And in my own case, I'm using Exam, which is one of the control panels that provides something that looks like an online server for you. Okay, so you need to start this Apache server right now. If your own is not already started, my own is already running on port 80, so you can go ahead and click on start for your own to start running. Alright, and once that is running, that means you have a server running already. And then to create the folder for what you want to practice right now, that has to be within our server. And since we are developing on our local drive, the specialized place known as a server within our local drive is in the htdocs. So I'm going to go to my htdocs right now, which in this case I went to my local drive, opened it up, and I saw a folder called examp. I opened that up, and now I'm in a folder called the htdocs, which in our case, since we're working offline, this is called a server. So I can create the folder right here right now. And I'm going to just call that something like CURL. which is Coil. And what I'm going to do right now is to go ahead and then open that particular folder that I have just created in my editor. So I'm going to do that, open that up with my, that's a Visual Studio Code. Alright, so I have that opened right now with my editor, and I'm going to go ahead and create my first file right here, which I'm going to just call that curl.php, and it's completely empty. So let's go ahead and open that up, and we can go ahead and write some code right now. Alright, so going by this particular slide, let's go back a bit here. Going by the steps, the first step for us to take now will be to start a session. That is, talking about a Coil session. So for us to do that right now, we're going to kind of follow this step. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to first of all create a variable, and I'm going to use that variable to initiate the Coil. And after that, the second thing is to go ahead and set the option. And after that, I'll have to run the Coil. And finally, I'm going to have to close the Coil connection. So let's go back and interpret that right now. So I'm going to throw in my PHP tag. That will be the first thing to do right now. I can go ahead and close it. And within this place right now, what I'm going to do, the first thing that I'm going to do now is to create a kind of a variable, which I'm going to just call curl. And that is going to be equal to init, a Coil. That's going to be curl underscore init. And that's really basically a function, and I'm going to go ahead and terminate that line, then move on to the next line. So the next thing that we need to do now is to go ahead and set a couple of options, and I think I should comment these things so that you guys can make use of it at any time. So I'm going to just say something like a start curl session. That's what that line is doing. Then on the next line, I'm going to put another comment again and say something like set configuration. And to do that is really very simple. What I'm going to do right now is to use this function called coil setup. This function right now, coil underscore setup. That's what I'm going to do, and that is going to be curl underscore setups. And within this function right now, this is going to need about 4 parameters, 3 parameters. The first thing that is going to need right now will be this coil handler, or this variable that I use to initialize coil. So I'm going to copy that and put that right here. That will be the first configuration, or the first parameter that I'm going to need. The second parameter is going to be, the second parameter right now is going to be the constant that we're going to use to set the URL. And the constant that we're going to use now is going to be callout. So I'm going to just say callout underscore URL, which we have really discussed before now. We normally use this particular constant to set the URL. We could put the URL up here and then maybe put it in a variable and put it right here, but we can also go ahead and kind of put it right here. So for instance, let's say that let's go ahead and access a URL right now. Let's say that it's going to be http www.google.com, and this is just the URL that we're going to access right now. So I will terminate this line, and down here what I'm going to do right now is to run the coil. And to write the coil is really very simple. I'm going to have to use the coil exec function. So I'm going to just say curl underscore exec, and I'm going to need one parameter, which is still going to be this. So I'm going to copy that and paste it right here. That's the parameter that I need right there. And finally, what I'm going to do right now is to close coil. And to close it, I'm going to have to use the function called curl underscore close. And of course, I'm still going to need that variable, so I'll pass it in right there. And I'll go ahead and then terminate this line right now. Okay, so I've done that. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and save this, Ctrl S to save. And if I go to my browser right now, and let's try to access that file, And to access anything that you have within the hosting docs, which is your local server, while you are developing, you can just say localhost / let's say the name of the file was called Coil, and the file itself was called the name of the folder was Coil, and then the file was also Coil. So it's going to be, the first thing here is the folder followed by the file name, which is coil.php. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up right now, and that should load the Google interface for us within this browser if everything worked fine. And congratulations, if you really got that up to this point. You were able to load Google interface, the search interface, within the local file that you created called coil.php, and that is really possible. So that's great. Please just take a look at the code again. It's really very simple lines of a code. We only set a variable here to initialize the coil, and right here we now set some configurations to configure the coil, and after that we run it by executing that, and finally we closed the coil. So that is just that. So we're going to try something more, and the thing that we're going to try now is let's go ahead and let's say we open another file right now, a folder. No, let's say we access a website that is called something like let's say flutterwave.com. Let's open this website right now, and as you can see, the website has really opened. We just kind of access the website on a different tab. So the reason why I accessed it is just to copy the URL. So I'm going to copy this particular URL and see how is it that I can load it dynamically within this place. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one out, and if I go to my coding environment right now, I'm going to have to paste that right here like this. So this is https://www.flutterwave.com/us, and this is the reason why I'm trying to show you this, is that this one has a HTTPS, but the one we just removed, which is Google, this particular one didn't have HTTPS, and this one is not going to load because this to working with this particular URL offline without it being loaded on the secure protocol, is we're going to be having a kind of a problem loading that, but we're going to see how we are going to solve that. Some people may tell you to go ahead and install something like a local issuer certificate, but I figured out how to do that by including a very simple line of code that can go ahead and help us kind of view this without having to install that. So we're going to find a way to ignore the HTTPS checking. But for now, let's save these changes, and if we refresh our web page, and we expect to load up Flutterwave, but it's not going to load up. And as you can see, everything is blank. That is because it does not really allow that particular HTTPS to load. Okay. Alright, so if we go back to our development environment, I'm going to go ahead and set that right up here. And let me put a comment here. I say something like turn off mandatory SSL checker. And to really turn that off is very simple. We're going to just have to do that by putting that in within this particular. So I'm going to copy this line. I'll copy this line right now and paste it right here. And to change that, this is going to be coil. This one is correct, but I'm going to go ahead and change this particular constant. So instead of collup_URL, what I'm going to have is collup_SSL_verify peer. So I'm going to just say verify peer like that. And then the last parameter that we're going to need is going to be to go ahead and set this to false. Okay. So what this is going to do is that it's going to make sure that doesn't check for SSL. It does not force over to HTTPS. Okay, it's going to go ahead and load the web page for us without a kind of pushing us to be sure that we're on a HTTPS before it can load up the web page. So let's go ahead and save this page, and if you go back to our browser right now and we'll refresh, we should load up that particular Flutterwave that is secured right now. And congratulations, that has been loaded. So you see how you have dynamically loaded another web page that is HTTPS enabled. This is an encrypted web page. So it is under HTTPS, but we are able to load it up just using this particular line. And that's one of the things that have helped me a lot when I'm working with powerful APIs that are really encrypted. If you want to work with them offline, people get turned down at this point when they cannot work with the application that is really encrypted, that has a HTTPS enabled. Okay, so but this helps me, this particular line of code helps me interact with the API without having to install a local issuer certificate to do that. Okay, so that's really great. And all right, so in the next one we're going to really dive deep, and before we really go into doing that, I would like you to create an account with Paystack, which is one of the APIs that we're going to be using in this platform. And I'm going to leave a link to the Paystack website below, but you can just go to paystack.com and then create a free account from this place, because that's the next API that we're going to really make use of. And with that, I'm talking about how is it that we're going to be kind of dealing with posts. So the next method that we're going to deal with right now is going to be post. After we deal with post, we can make use of a gate. But for now, just go ahead and create an account with Paystack. Have that account in place. Make sure you get it verified, and then when I come back on the next one, we're going to have to learn how we can integrate this Paystack to our web application.